Okay, I just want to throw in a few extra thoughts on Ed's terrestrial map. It's well known that everyone says that Ed's moon fountain shows the different phases of the moon. I think with Ed's sun couch, Ed is showing the different phases of the sun, namely the equator of the sun. There's a researcher out there named Maurice Cotterell. I just started looking into him at the end of last year. He says a number of interesting things about the sun, and he talks about the sun having 4 magnetic bubbles. 3 can be seen from Earth, 1 is always hidden. I think that's exactly what Ed is trying to tell us here. Negative, positive, negative. And then I believe these both are positive and negative in this phase here. I'll show you really quickly what I'm talking about. There's a video called Secrets of the Super Gods by Maurice Cotterell out there. You can also find it on YouTube. I'll just show you a quick segment of it.
I joined my 2 spacecraft, and my 2 spacecraft sent back signals of particles that were being detected from the sun. At the time we couldn't understand what they are, but now we're familiar with them. And the sun, it was seen, was spinning and sprinkling out particles towards the Earth. Positive particles for 7 days, negative particles for 7 days, positive particles for about 4, and then we get some mixture here of both. And then another sector of particles. Now these particles, the positive charges are the nuclei of the hydrogen atom as we get nuclear fusion in the sun. The negative particles are electrons that are smashed off the atom. And we now know they travel to Earth and they get caught up in these Van Allen belts. Now I've put together this model of the sun. And I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that sphere? That's better. Put it there. This is the sun and this is the Earth, and the Earth goes around the sun once every 365 days. We now know that the sun has 4 bubbles of magnetic field around its equator. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it has a north pole and a south pole. Every 11 years the north pole changes polarity, the top becomes minus, the bottom becomes positive. Now, in the next 3 or 4 minutes you're going to get slightly confused. And you say, what's this guy talking about?
Fast forward a bit.
Magnetic field come back together as they started off. And I was working at Cranfield, so I had access to the biggest computer at the time in the UK. And I wanted to know when these 3 variables would all be back together, because that would be a cycle of magnetic activity. Now I knew that this one, the North Pole, rotates every 37 days. If you're on the Earth, because the Earth has moved during that 37 days, it takes longer. It's 40 days altogether. The equator goes round once every 26 days.
This disc here would represent Ed's sun couch.
To line up 28 days. So I thought there had to be a way of calculating when these 2 magnetic fields and the Earth are all in a line again. Astronomers said, this is impossible. You've got 1 magnetic field there and 1 magnetic field there. How can you describe the sun's magnetic field with regard to the Earth? It's impossible. So I thought about this and I thought, well, it's not impossible, because I know every 87 days they overlap. The pole is overlapping the equator every 87 days. They're both moving, but every 87 days the North Pole overlaps the equator. So I thought, if I close my eyes for 87 days and only open them after 87 days, they will both be glued together. And if I close my eyes for 87 days again and move them around, in 87 days they'd both be glued together, but in a different position. In a mathematical sense, this is differentiating the polar cap with respect to the equator. It's called, Isaac Newton invented differentiation from calculus. So this is what I applied that to, but with rotational variables. And I was able to put a graph together. Once these two were glued together, I could then make a graph of the sun's magnetic field in regard to the Earth. And the results were very interesting. I'll come back to that in a few seconds. But now we know why we get 7 days negative particles coming to the Earth from the sun. Then we get 7 days positive particles, 7 days negative particles, 7 days positive particles. But what we know is that if these two begin rotating together, the blue one and the equator, because the equator is going more quickly, the blue one falls behind. So that after 1 month, the blue one has moved backwards through field number 1. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. During the next month, the North Pole will move back through field number 2. So if you're on the Earth, you won't see number 2 that month. What you'll see is 1, 3, and 4.
So that number 2 would be the node missing on Ed's sun couch.
Number 2. So you won't see number 2 that month. 3, sorry. You will see 1, 2, and 4. So every month, the polar cap burns out one of those sectors. And we see this here, the polar cap sliding backwards, where the particles are both negative and positive, as the North Pole slides through them.
It's actually a very good video. I recommend you check it out. The whole thing is very interesting. I believe that is exactly what Ed was trying to show us way back then. Ed knew of all this knowledge.